Please welcome Vice President Programming and Development for Freeform, Carrie Burke. Principal and Founder, Invincible Media, Vince Manns. Executive Vice President, Talent and Casting for the CW, Lori Openden. Producer, Jamie Tarsis. Chairman, the Beckman Group, and our moderator, Preston Beckman.
All right, the mega panel.
Yes, right.
There you go.
This is a current meeting. This is actually, if you think about it, this is the end result of all of us having contact with Brandon Tartikoff, who I think we're going to talk about, among other things, right, Gene? Because you've got programming, casting, marketing, scheduling. So you pretty much have a current meeting here. Anyway,
If you have a show, we can pretty much take care of it for you.
that's true. That's
right
true.
here.
But it
Right.
was once.
That's
or twice a
mentorship
week.
right there.
Yeah, once or twice a week, we would gather for an hour or two every morning to
Right.
have these current meetings.
And we have fun current meetings, and I think there's a way to start, and then we'll just see where this goes. What was, who wants to start? What was your first interactions with Brandon, and how did he help you with your career? Jamie?
Well, honestly, my first interaction with Brandon was a meeting with him, but I had the advantage of having a father that made shows for Brandon, and they were very close. So I got a meeting with Brandon. I didn't get a job because of that. I had to then run the gauntlet of who was at NBC at the time. It was Perry Simon, and write a tremendous amount of coverage. But I also took a lot of lumps for when I got the job for having a dad who was actually doing shows for the network at the time. And there's a horrible apocryphal story that my dad did a pilot for NBC, and then in this big meeting that Brandon was there, and I don't believe that I did this, I said to my father, "But come on, we know, Dad, this isn't your best work." I contend I did not say that, but that is a story I've had told to me many times. Yes.
I heard that he also said, "Jamie, you weren't my best work either." I'm serious. I think I heard that.
It was that.
Yes. Lord?
I was the cast.
We're getting more laughs than Rachel Bloom. I just want to make that clear right now.
It's a
If
CW
you think broadcast executives aren't funny, wait until he opens up his mouth. Lori?
I was a casting director on the original pilot of Hill Street Blues and on the show for about 3 years. And I met Brandon because that was an NBC show. And I developed a relationship with him. And suddenly being female and being married and having children was an asset because Brandon felt that the audience could more identify with somebody like me and me with them than the typical casting director. So when there was an opening, he helped bring me over to NBC, and where I stayed for 14 years. And it was a great ride, just a great ride, and he was a magnificent person that I loved working for.
I'm just really disappointed this is not the choreography.
You can stay.
I put in a lot of work.
Or you can just do a dance.
There's no
right now.
dancing apparently at all in this panel. Brandon, I have a different story because I didn't physically work with Brandon that long because he hired me to become co-president of marketing for NBC Universal in the 90s. Right after electricity was invented. So but his influence on me, on many marketers, marketing people, started when he started in marketing. And what he did, even as simple as it seems now, he brought showmanship to marketing. He brought showmanship. He made it a true creative career. And that inspired not only me, but all the rest of us who were behind him. And then also, he became president of the network. Hey, I can do that. So to me, it's not always learning telling you what to do, but sometimes it's bigger than that. It's just inspiration kind of thing. That's what he did for me, and for for many of us at that juncture.
Carrie?
And no dancing, apparently.
It's early. It's still early.
Yeah.
I started NBC as an intern when I was still in college, and I got lucky enough that I was in the office of NBC Productions, which was kind of like Brandon's playground. And he would just hang around in that office all the time and take us bowling. And so, so I got to spend an inordinate amount of time around him, and I was graduating college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life until I had that internship. And then I went, I can't believe these are jobs that people get paid to do. I want one of these jobs. I don't have to write, but I get to work with writers, and I get to be around shows as they're being created. And so I stuck around after I graduated and I temped until Jamie had the good sense to hire me. The kindness to hire me. And my first real job there was as assistant to Jamie. And speaking of mentorship, since this panel is about that, we're the same age, but she certainly taught me. I didn't know my ass from my elbow. I didn't know anyone in this town, anything about anything, and taught me a hell of a lot. So huge gratitude to you. And then the thing about Brandon was I was Jamie's assistant. I've been an intern, I was an assistant, and then an executive job opened up. And I had to get coffee for everybody who came in to interview for that job. It was in the drama development department. And I wanted the job, but I was totally unqualified. But he encouraged me, and Jamie encouraged me, and Warren and Perry were there at the time, and they encouraged me. And like Jamie, I ran the gauntlet. I had to cover everything. I did fake network schedules. And at the end of the day, I got the job, and I won the job. I felt like I did. I did so much work for it. And he treated me exactly the same when I was an intern, when I was an assistant, when I was a temp, as he did when I was an executive. And that was a great lesson that I hope I haven't forgotten.
I had a different relationship with him because he and I, when he became president of entertainment, I had just started at NBC, and I spent the first 11 years in New York as a research associate, and then went up to network. And back then, and I don't know if you guys felt that way, these network presidents were almost like legendary. It was like, there used to be this yearly meeting to kick off the HRTS, and they'd be up there, and they were like bigger than life. Yeah. And so I knew of Brandon, but I didn't know him until I moved up to the network part of research and was given Saturday morning as a day part to specialize in it. And the best thing about Saturday morning was nobody cared about it. Nobody, other than Brandon and Vince.
Yeah.
That's true. He had a show on.
Yeah, that sounded really bad, by the way.
No, that's okay. It's, anyway, so I went out one year and gave a presentation on Saturday morning and met Brandon, and that was and then we were going to set the schedule a couple of months later, and he started calling me and asking me questions. And I was in a room, and we had a scheduling board. We had a Saturday morning scheduling board. I think it went from 7 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon, Saved by the Bell. And he goes up there, and he puts up the schedule, okay? And I'm sitting there, and he comes over, and he hands me a tile. And he says, go up there. And that was my first... That's when I realized, I think I'm going to do this for a living, but it was just so exciting having Brandon Tartikoff hand you a tile and say, go, and he listened, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
So, you kind of alluded, Vince and I had dinner last night, so he stole my line. Mm-hmm. But, what are some of the things that, you carried through your career from having known him, and some of the philosophy, thinking?
I don't know if these are philosophy. Well, they may be, but they're just two things. I mean, there are many more. I worked for him for a long time, but there are two things that are particularly memorable. One was carried over from Grant Tinker, and the other one was that when we were at the NBC building, there was a time during that process where Brandon had been ill and he recovered. But the story as it's told is that in spite of what was going on with him, he took the stairs every day. And it was 3 floors up rather than taking the elevator, even though he was not in the best of health. And I remember that after I'd left NBC and the network was still housed in that building, every time I would come in to pitch a show as a producer, I would tell that story to the writers and whoever else I was bringing in, and I would say, we have to take the stairs because this is kind of the legend that Brandon always took the stairs, and that is something that has always stuck with me. And the other thing, which I think is a vestige of Grant Tinker too, but Brandon sort of, oh, well, no, there was the Brandon thing was, don't tell me how the watch is made, I just want to know what time it is. And that has been very, very valuable. It was valuable to us then, it's valuable to me now. It's sort of, I don't need all this crap, just get to the point, you know. And that was an incredibly valuable thing.
I remember he used to say that that you had to, when you were going to pitch an idea for a show, you had to pitch it within 1 sentence because that's about as much as sales could understand. And if you got to sentence 2, you would lose them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. If any of you are interested, I remember his book he wrote, The Last Great Ride, which is inaccurate. There's been many great rides since then, but I remember him talking about all the shows that were pitched to him. And what I learned the most from him, he was really good at casting and had a great eye for talent. But it was more about how he treated the press, how he treated marketing, how he treated what we called at the time suppliers. I haven't heard that word in a long time, but that's what it was called then. And he just had a natural charisma about him. And I used to watch that and thought, wow, that really works. There's a reason this guy has risen to the top and made so many friends in the business. He just treated people with his charisma and loved television. Had a love for television from the time he was a little boy all the way through. And loved doing it. And he went on after NBC to do features and never loved it the same. Yeah. It was the wrong place for him. He was a real TV lover.
Like I said, the creativity and showmanship that he always had about him, that he always emphasized, that was something that was always in the back of my mind. When we were at NBC, we hired artists, really, not marketing people. We hired people who saw this as a creative career, not just as marketing people. And it was fun. And he was always, whenever we did something, he was always in the back of our minds. I wish he had been there when we did Must See TV, but he was there, if you know what I mean. He was all part of that. What we did was we did big things, and we set a standard that, you know, we weren't just going to let things slide. We were always going to go for broke on every show. Was the best show we ever saw, even though they weren't. Not all of them were. No names would be mentioned. But we put in, and he was always there in spirit with us doing that.
Well, I always felt he was very populist, even though we had, you know, the Hill Street Blues and the St. Elsewhere. We also had Mr. T. You know, we had the A-Team. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we put on. I remember when Warren Littlefield, who we all worked with for quite a long time, Warren told me, when Warren asked me to come out and be the head of scheduling, he said he had told Brandon that he was going to ask me to do it. And Brandon said to him, well, he's got an opinion on everything and sometimes he's wrong. And Warren said, coming from the man who gave us Manimal and Mr. Smith. So, you know, so it was always, what was great was that, you know, it didn't all have to be premium television. He was really interested in programming for the masses, and And there's some really interesting stuff that we did back then. And
We were more into the baseball averages. 330, we're batting 333. It's good.
But I also think that the thing about him that was, I feel like, a little bit unique and specific and hasn't happened so much since then, is every writer and creator who worked at the network loved him. He liked creative people. He liked writers, and he appreciated them and nurtured them and didn't distance himself from any of those people and sort of leaned into those relationships in a way that I don't know necessarily that at this point with all the corporate intervention happens so much anymore. It was he had very intimate relationships with the people that created shows for him, and that was his design. And I feel like it made them all feel like they were part of something that was bigger than their shows, and it was about this network and this atmosphere that Brandon created, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
there's
had a
so many more
famous softball
layers
game.
now, and it's not as easy to do that.
And also
it's not
back
as
then,
often.
we were broadcasters, which I don't think is the case anymore.
No, you kind of
where-
apologize for being broadcasters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But by broadcaster, I mean, you know, Brandon knew about sales, and he knew about marketing.
Yeah.
He obviously knew about scheduling, and he knew about programming. And we were all, you know, brought up to know as much about the whole business as possible, because, you know, if you said, I'm just going to make the shows, well, you don't understand. There's all these other factors that go into it, including, you know, what's the sales point. So we were really, back then, there was a lot, we had to know everything, which I don't think is the case. I don't want to sound like a get off my lawn, old guy. But I don't think it's the case anymore where you know, you learn, you see the full picture. It's like you go in there and you just do your job, and I think it was just a different era back
Well,
then.
this is my time for the CW plug, because we're a very small network. We're now up to 12 hours, so we're all on the third floor of our building. So we're more like that, I think, than the big networks are now.
Right.
I'm involved in marketing meetings and in scheduling and everything. We're all together because we're a small group. And I hope you're all watching, because this is a young crowd, right? You're all Riverdale fans, right? Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm done. Go.
It seems
Boy,
like
sucking up, right? Yeah,
entree
that's
for
great.
Carrie should
I'm
actually.
not-
You're already halfway there.
I'll throw in to your last question about what did we learn from him. I thought a lot about that before coming here, and the one thing that just kept that comes up every time I think about him was this idea. He was the first person to say to me, every show has to be someone's favorite show. And that sounds so simple, like, okay, well, of course they have to be someone's favorite show. But when you get into development and programming, and particularly in those days, in networks, we were 22 hours a week, and you're buying shows, you can sort of talk yourself into, well, some people might like that. Or we'll give that a go and just see. And that test of, is it going to be somebody's favorite show? And is it going to be enough people's favorite show that it's going to live, really matters. And I think the reason he kept those low-rated shows on that were so critically acclaimed in those years, the Hill Streets and the Cheerses and the well, LA Law wasn't low-rated, that came on strong, but they were someone's favorite show. Somebody was passionate about them, and that's something I think that really matters. You can get cynical in these jobs, and trying to remember that.
Yeah, we definitely had a lot of fun. I also think while we're up here, it's important we talk about Warren a little bit, Warren
Yeah.
Littlefield,
Yep.
because even though all of us, you know, worked with Brandon and everything, I think really for most of, I think I'm speaking for all of us, we flourished during the 1990s when Warren took over from Brandon, and you know, really, we had like the next iteration of must-see TV. And I'll just tell one quick Warren story, because, you know, there's something that you remember, somebody told you something. And I remember I was in some meeting, and I used to hate it when people would tell me how to schedule a network.
I remember that.
And I probably threw a hissy fit, whatever, and pissed a couple people off. And we walked out, and Warren just calmly took me aside and he said, "You have the ultimate second guest job." And that was the best piece of advice I ever got in my life, because I realized that no matter what I did, there was someone in that room who was going to tell me, "You don't know what you're talking about." And once I realized that, I think that's how I succeeded in what I did. And I don't know if anybody has any other Warren stories or a quick.
He was a great boss.
Yeah,
Loved
yeah,
working
I
for
don't.
Warren. He was, I remember all the years I worked for Warren, it was like 11 years or something like that. He blew up at us twice, and he was right both times. And that, I mean, I've had bosses blow up like every day. But Warren was a calm personality, and he really did bring out the best in all of us, I think,
Yeah.
just because of who he was.
He inherited that, or had it natively, that showmanship from Brandon, that, you know, that sense that, and there was a twinkle in both of their eyes all the time, that, you know, we got to go do these jobs every day. That was this gigantic playground, and at the end of the day, it's show business. And we were the lucky few. That you know, that had, and I don't know, remember this coming from Brandon. I remember Warren saying this about the halls of NBC in those days. He used to say, like, "This is Yankee Stadium." You know, we get to come to work every day in Yankee Stadium, where the best people come to work, and the best writers, and the best actors and creators, and like how lucky we are. And somehow that affection for the shows and that affection for television and that joy, I think, translated to the audience.
Well, I got the green light, so I guess we have to.
Oh, yeah?
See, I told you.
That was,
Yeah, that was fun.
Just like childbirth. Just like childbirth. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's great seeing everybody again. I mean, this
I'm
really
happy-
is like a
I'm
current
happy that you
meeting.
said in the 90s instead of last century. So
That's true.
That was
the
appropriate.
bad marketing.
That's good.
Right. But anyway, thanks.
Okay.
I think we're ready.
I did have a moment with another mentor, Roland Poindexter, who the first time I ever had to pitch something for our president, we did a practice one, and as soon as I finished, I ran in the bathroom and and he came in, he's like, "You can't get worked up about this. You can't think about all the money that's going into a project. All you have to do is sell the show to one person in that room and make them excited about it." And so whenever I have to pitch something now, that's always how I look at it, is just find that key person.
I worked with a really amazing hairstylist. I asked her, I was like, "So what's the best thing I should know about learn to be a department head? Like, what's the one thing, the key?" She goes, "Just always say yes. No matter what they come to you, no matter what situation you're in, just say, 'Of course, I'll take care of that. Sure, I'll do that.'"
There's a lot of things that I've learned over the years, and some were hard lessons and some weren't. If I can pass on any of the lessons that I've learned to help somebody that much, that's enough. That's all, you know, it just needs to be that much.
Mr. Shoemaker was a really quiet person and a man of a few words. But I think that watching him with people probably meant more than anything else, because he had a way of connecting to people, and it was a thing that I've recognized in people who are successful, and it's the power of looking people in the eye and connecting to them. And that's a way where you meet someone right where they are.